Indiana Fever fans have officially hit their limit. The frustration in Indianapolis is boiling over, the excuses are wearing thin, and whatever patience this fanbase had left may have disappeared completely after last night. You could feel the pressure inside that post-game media room from the very first question, because when your star point guard pours in 32 points, knocks down unreal clutch shots, and does everything possible to carry a struggling team across the finish line, fans expect one thing from the head coach afterward: accountability. Real answers, ownership of the disaster unfolding on the court. Instead, following Indiana's crushing 104-102 double overtime loss at home, Fever head coach Stephanie White delivered a response that left fans even more furious. Welcome back to WNBA Pro. Today we're diving into what many are already calling one of the most frustrating and deflective post-game press conferences the WNBA has seen in a long time. Stephanie White stood before reporters and seemed determined to avoid responsibility for the team's collapsing defense, questionable rotations, and the complete lack of in-game adjustments that allowed the Washington Mystics to score over 100 points in consecutive games on Indiana's home court. At this point, the warning signs are impossible to ignore. Anyone who watched the game, and especially anyone who heard the post-game comments afterward, likely walked away with the same concern. This Fever team looks completely directionless right now. They constantly find themselves digging out of massive holes, depending on late-game heroics just to survive, and scrambling for miracle moments in the fourth quarter to even stay competitive. But the biggest concern of all may be this: the coaching staff appears to have no clear solution for the deeper issues destroying this team from the inside out.
When we don't consistently defend. And this is on us as coaches. Like, this is our responsibility. We got to be disciplined the entire game. We got to be disciplined every possession. We're taking chances. We're fouling shooters who are about to shoot tough shots. We got breakdowns in coverages.
When reporters challenged Stephanie White about the disastrous second and third quarters, the exact stretch where Indiana completely unraveled on both ends of the floor, her response only added more frustration. She said, "We put a lot of pressure on our offense to be perfect when we don't consistently defend. We have to be more disciplined. We had breakdowns in coverage. We need to figure out the right combinations and rotations that create efficiency." On the surface, it sounded like a typical coach trying to explain a loss. But if you really listened closely, there was a glaring problem. She never actually answered what reporters were asking. Instead of explaining why certain lineups were getting destroyed inside the paint possession after possession, she leaned on generic basketball terminology. Instead of addressing why Aaliyah Boston, the cornerstone center of the franchise, was repeatedly pulled away from the basket and stuck defending in space while Washington attacked the interior with ease, she avoided specifics altogether. And perhaps most alarming, White openly admitted the staff still needs to find the right combinations, as if that isn't one of the primary responsibilities of an experienced professional head coach before the game even begins. While Stephanie White spoke in circles and relied on vague coaching language, Caitlin Clark stepped to the podium and brought a completely different energy. No deflection, no cliches, just a direct and brutally honest assessment of what went wrong.
And that's our biggest area of growth is everyone wants to go over when they're making shots. And for us, that's our biggest room for improvement right now is when things aren't going well, we still got to be able to defend and, find ways to get stops, and we haven't done that very well to this point, same way it was with our
You could see the wear and tear written all over Caitlin Clark's face after the game. The frustration was impossible to miss, and when she was asked about Indiana's defensive collapse, she didn't dodge the issue or offer empty excuses. She confronted it head on. Clark said, "I think we let our offense affect the way we defend way too much. Everybody wants to play defense when shots are falling, but when things stop going our way, we still have to defend." That quote says everything about where this team is right now. It's the kind of brutally honest statement you expect from the face of a franchise. Clark wasn't subtly hinting at problems. She was openly challenging the mindset inside that locker room. In many ways, she exposed the exact attitude that has been quietly dragging this team down all season. Right now, the Fever are playing emotionally dependent basketball. When the outside shots are dropping, the energy is high, the pace picks up, and suddenly the effort on defense looks respectable. But the moment the the offense cools off, everything falls apart. The body language changes, players stop sprinting back, transition defense disappears, and opponents begin attacking the rim possession after possession with almost no resistance. And the numbers from this game are absolutely brutal. The Washington Mystics scored 58 points in the paint against Indiana. 58. That is a catastrophic number at the professional level. Allowing that much damage inside the key tells you everything you need to know. It points to broken defensive rotations, lack of communication, poor interior protection, and a level of physical softness that simply cannot survive in the WNBA.
Defensive moments and worst.
I think a lot of things. One, intensity. I think attention to detail. It's little things. It's initial positioning. It's communication. It's reacting. It's relaxing off the ball. There are a lot of things that are outside of, and great players make great plays. And the thing that Washington does is they keep moving.
When reporters questioned Stephanie White about Indiana getting completely overwhelmed in the paint, she pointed to issues like communication breakdowns, poor defensive positioning, and players losing focus on that end of the floor. But the one subject she carefully avoided was the roster management and lineup choices that played a major role in the collapse. Why was Monique Billings logging 36 minutes as the primary backup post player while Washington's front court dominated the game offensively? Why did the Fever enter the season without adding a true rim protector capable of controlling the interior, instead relying on stretch options like Damiris Dantas? Why did Indiana continue getting burned on weak side rotations all night without meaningful adjustments? And perhaps most confusing of all, why did it take until late in the fourth quarter for the coaching staff to finally start calling effective out-of-bounds plays that generated quality looks? At some point, these issues stop looking like isolated mistakes and start looking like systemic coaching failures. And the biggest victim of all of it may be Caitlin Clark, who is putting together performances worthy of MVP conversations while carrying an enormous burden every single night. Clark played 37 exhausting minutes in this game and gave Indiana almost everything she had. She scored 32 points, knocked down 7 three-pointers on 17 attempts, and finally looked comfortable attacking defenders with that dangerous step-back move going left. She battled through constant pressure, double teams, and spacing problems that made her job significantly harder. Time after time, she delivered massive shots just to keep Indiana alive. But after all of that effort, Clark's reaction at the podium said more than any stat line could. She made it clear that individual numbers meant absolutely nothing to her because the team still walked away with a loss.
And obviously going to the left, that's what I like, but at the same time, I don't get a ton of catch and shoot threes, so, take what you can get, but it was great, but I don't really care because we lost.
Caitlin, 37 minutes tonight, how do you feel coming out of that one? See the smile on your face, so.
I don't really care because we lost. Those words from Caitlin Clark perfectly capture the mentality of a competitor who refuses to celebrate stats while her team continues falling apart around her. Right now, Clark looks like a superstar carrying a franchise that still hasn't figured out how to build a winning structure around her, and this is becoming much bigger than one painful loss. The playoff picture is already starting to tighten, and Indiana is throwing away games they absolutely should be winning at home. Giving up 100+ points on a regular basis is not a minor issue. It is a flashing warning sign of a team heading toward disaster. If the Fever do not solve these defensive problems immediately, their postseason hopes could disappear far earlier than anyone expected. Now think about the fallout if Caitlin Clark and the Fever fail to reach the playoffs. The conversation around this season would change instantly. Instead of talking about growth, momentum, and the explosion of interest around the WNBA, the headlines would focus on how Indiana wasted one of the league's brightest stars. We already saw how harsh the criticism became for players like Angel Reese when expectations were not met. If Indiana collapses, the media pressure surrounding Clark and this organization will become relentless. The most frustrating part is that the fans are doing everything possible to support this team. The arena atmosphere has been incredible. The crowds are showing up every night with playoff level energy, and Clark herself acknowledged that the fans helped fuel the team's late game push. But crowd noise cannot protect the rim. Fans cannot repair defensive rotations or solve roster construction problems. problems, and they certainly cannot fill the glaring hole Indiana still has in the front court. Stephanie White's post-game comments only made the situation feel worse. Instead of sounding like a coach with answers, it sounded like someone trying to avoid responsibility while the team continues slipping in the wrong direction. When your team gets outscored 20-9 in a home quarter because of careless fouls and repeated defensive breakdowns that hand the opponent free throws over and over again, that reflects a lack of discipline from the top down. At this point, the grace period is gone. Christy Sides faced heavy criticism during her time with the Fever, but even those teams did not look this disorganized defensively this early in the season. And if Indiana keeps losing games because of confusing rotations and non-existent interior defense, the pressure on the front office is going to explode. Calls for Stephanie White's job are no longer coming only from emotional fans online. More people are starting to view it as a legitimate basketball conversation. You simply cannot afford to waste 3 two-point performances from Caitlin Clark because your team still cannot contain basic pick-and-roll action or protect the paint consistently. So now the questions become unavoidable. Is Stephanie White losing control of this team? Are the players equally responsible for the lack of defensive intensity when the offense struggles? And how long can the organization continue ignoring the obvious weakness in the roster? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you want more in-depth WNBA coverage and analysis that goes beyond the surface level narratives, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next breakdown. The pressure is building fast in Indiana, and time is running out.